So a few days ago, I'm at the Tate Modern in London, which is where I am. This is actually, believe it or not, that's the British Library, but I just got kicked out because it's closing. And into a gallery where a film by the great South African artist William Kentridge is showing. This is back in the Tate. A woman walks and takes a flash photograph with her smartphone. Thank you very much. And about 30 minutes later, I'm in the gallery at the Tate that collects a group of paintings by Mark Rothko, paintings he did for a restaurant, and a gentleman's smartphone rings. And he answers it, and I kind of glare at him, and he walks out into the adjacent gallery, I guess because the masterpieces there are a more appropriate place to take a business call. Okie dokie. Moral equivalents are hard to draw precisely across cultures and times and spaces, and it is much easier to offer up sweeping overstatements. So I am going to resist the temptation to say this behavior, which we have all committed and which we are all too familiar with now with smartphones, is a threat to civilization or civility or will undermine something specific about what it means to be a human being. And yet, I would like to say that this action with smartphones is not good for us, and specifically because it does make it more difficult to move into ourselves in a way that assists creativity, at least the creativity of our inner thoughts, and as a result, maybe threatens some version of self-definition. Hold on a second. Sorry, the people who work at the British Library are leaving on their bikes, and it got a little noisy. Harder to move into yourself, that threatens some self-definition. It's kind of like exploring a city. I mean, you come to London, as I am for the second time, in order to see some things and visit my friends Mark and Rich and Slade, each of whom have put me up despite my overstaying my welcome. And, you start at Trafalgar Square or House of Commons or London Bridge, where all the tourists are, Piccadilly Circus. And then if you're lucky and if you have time and you're willing to get lost, you explore into the neighborhoods and you find that hidden gem of a cafe or a beautiful park where kids and parents are doing their thing, or maybe it's just a doorway that is architecturally interesting, or the people who live there have pimped out somehow in a particularly hearthy way, and that makes the trip, or makes a big part of it because it's yours, you found it. You're off the path, or further along it. And I don't think it's so different than when you're watching an artist with lots of detail like Kentridge, right? There's lots of detail in his work, and what that means is that rewatching it is rewarding. Its own kind of reward, like exploring the city. You see things on the fifth or sixth viewing of the film at the Tate that you did not see on the first or second. And I know that because it's only 7 minutes long and I watched it 6 times. And the sort of thread of oppression that he's drawing together, even more than the story he's making with those details, becomes stronger. It is like being dropped into a city, in a sense, only with his iconography, it's as if the language doesn't make any sense to you, except somehow the street signs point you exactly where you need to go and tell you the origin story of where you are at the same time. The images of sort of mechanized human beings who are celebrating their own grotesquerie and get caught up in the dance of numbers and maps of domination, and all of that stifles empathy and moves them away from seeing the torture and the horror and the violence that they are inflicting on South Africa and on people. It kind of grabs the collar of your soul, and maybe none of that is right. Kentridge actually has a line in one of his other pieces that I love, which is, let's for once try not to be right, which I take to mean, yeah, big data, yeah, powers that be. We're not going to just go after what's right, maybe we're going to treat each other better somehow, which is absurdly cliche in the light of the kinds of terrors that he's depicting. But whether or not I'm right about Kentridge doesn't matter. It's where I was on the 4th and 5th and 6th viewing. And I can go as far as I want there into the neighborhoods of my own brain, just like exploring London, as long as somebody doesn't say, stop, don't go any further. And if that's true with Kentridge, in a way it's even more true, certainly just as true, with an artist who couldn't be more different, like Rothko. I mean, the delicacy of communing with something, of meditating with something that's out there in the world to see what's in you is even more precious, is that a fair word, with Rothko. Because with Kentridge, if you're in some real space that you can sort of identify, there are those street signs. You're in South Africa. There's things to identify, symbols that you can sort of connect with. Where the hell is Rothko? He's like in outer space somewhere. He's giving you this portal that's to the first day of everything or the last day of nothing. And there's these ancient temples that exist only, or pillars maybe, that exist only in the interterrestrial space of now. I mean, you're stuck in the phosphorescence of time. And again, what the hell does that mean? It's all crap. It's just in my head. But my head alone, when I'm meditating with this artist or the work that this artist has made. I'm sure Rothko is not as interesting as his art. I'm sure the history of London, as interesting as it is not as interesting to us as when we are with it, allowing it to make us more interesting. One of the great things about art is that its genius can be your partner into yourself. And every museum houses work that offers that offers you the chance to be a partner with genius. So long as someone isn't taking a call or taking a picture or saying, don't go there. I need to be the pusher of someone else's button. I need to feed the feed. So, if someone went to your church or synagogue or mosque, whatever you think of, organized religion or disorganized religion, and defecated on the altar there, I think that you might label that impolite. And you would especially object the congregation at that church or mosque or synagogue to object to you if you were the defecator in question. And that has to be some parallel to that and the temples of museums. Look, I'm a grump, and I'm not at all clear why this technology confers on everyone the right to have a phone call in the bus or the public park or a restaurant, and does not confer on me the same right to not hear that call. But that's a different kind of space. Let's just stick with museums for a second and say that it may be worth protecting the opportunity to investigate our own thoughts wherever they go in partnership with genius. And look, there are endless dead ends and all kinds of cul-de-sacs when we go in here, all kinds of failed journeys. But something about creativity and being ourselves requires us to go down those paths. And sure, it often seems like the same journey, but you also know when you get to somewhere new. And we should treasure that. We should hold on to it, just like we hold on to all the books that are ever printed here at the National Library, the British Library. So, two things, because this is a TED v. TED video, which means instead of ideas worth spreading, actions worth taking. Two actions. One, don't take your smartphone to the museum. Don't do it, or leave it in the checked bag or whatever, because you will avoid getting a glare from a grump like me, and avoid being the defecator in question, and you'll give yourself the chance to explore, to get beyond where the tourists go in your own head, if that makes sense, if that metaphor isn't too mixed at this point, right? And you don't have to see Kentridge or Rothko. You never have to see the great thing at the museum. You don't have to see the Mona Lisa at the Louvre. Go find something else. Skip 99.9% of what's ever in the museum, but find one thing and dig in a little bit. Make it the hidden gem. See where it takes you. Let it make something more of you, as it can, as it will if you give it a chance. And museums, number 2, you got to help us out. You got to start putting up big signs or insisting that people who come to your galleries don't bring smartphones there. And that isn't just for people like me, of whom I think there are a few. I mean, I know a few people who think of that Rothko room as a temple, as sacred space, and Kentridge's importance in South Africa cannot be overstated. But never mind that. You're going to lose your value proposition. I mean, if everything is only as valuable as its pixelated version, then we don't need the depth. We don't need the texture that is offered by real life, like a city. I mean, we all know that a lot of cities are becoming more homogenous and similar. Barcelona looks more like London, looks more like Amsterdam, looks more like New York than they did in the past. So you have to explore the neighborhoods to really find out what they're about. Closing up the gate here. And if you aren't offering access to that texture and depth at its best, which presumably great art is, at least one version of, then why do we need you? And we can't access that texture and depth if we're always being interrupted by the smartphones people are carrying, that I carry, that we all carry. We need your help, museums. And if you're not willing to do that, then please, while they are still valuable, sell all your work. Get rid of it and turn that money into food and water, because you can defend the temple of institutions like the Tate or like the British Library so long as they are helping us travel into ourselves. Maybe they have other purposes, of course they do, but that one in particular is under threat. And I know I said I wouldn't make sweeping generalizations, but there it is. I mean, I think it's probably great that we all breathe at about the same rate and that we all have a heart rate of roughly 60, unless you exercise a lot more than I do. And that offers possibility for that weave of oppression to be a weave of togetherness that can serve. And, you know, it certainly serves Silicon Valley, because something about our regularness means we all end up doing this all day. So there's got to be possibility in that regularness. But weirdness is good too. I mean, the thing about a Starbucks being in every city you go to means, okay, you can go to Starbucks. But it also means there's less weirdness. And weirdness gives us a mirror, maybe not of what we want to be, but the possibility of going that far with ourselves, of going further into an unknown neighborhood to find the hidden gem. Not just out there, but in ourselves. And not just in ourselves, but how we ourselves go back and forth with the world. There's a limitless magic in that. And art is one of the conducers of that magic. Has always been, will always be, so long as we don't keep saying stop.